Hey friends, you're tuned in to the Learn or Be Learned podcast, a show where wisdom meets curiosity in order to discover the human experience. I'm your host, Shiva D, and remember, you either learn from or you're learned from. Now, let's get back to the show. All right, welcome back everybody to another great episode. I'm really excited about this book episode. It's called The Alchemist. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. It's actually a somewhat fiction book written with the essence of personal growth. In layman terms, we could call it a fable. It's pretty much what it is. And the author is incredible. I love the message of this book. And at its core, the universal theme is that the alchemist deals with finding one's own path in life, and the journey of this protagonist, Santiago, serves as a metaphor for what the larger quest for meaning is in all individuals, right? So the path of life that we take. I made a few bullet points here. I would call this a very inspirational book. It's a simple fable but carries philosophical depth. It's got a relatable journey, and it's just so elegantly written in its prose, right? Meaning it's got such natural speech to it. It makes it so straightforward that many can understand the story. So without further ado, let's jump right into this book. I'm really excited to share it with you all. So there's three main sections I want to get into here. One is the rich symbolism, so let's start there, right? So Santiago is the protagonist, and he symbolizes how every individual is on their own personal quest for meaning. And his journey represented the universal human journey towards understanding one's own dream, or personal legend is what they called it, personal destiny, personal legend. And I think this is very relatable, right? We see this in books such as Man's Search for Meaning. You'll see the buzzword life purpose, things like that. And I think a lot of us tend to think, what am I here to do? What is my journey? What is my dreams? What is my legend, my destiny that I want to leave, right? And that's what makes the protagonist very relatable, is that he's so confused. He's just this young man, very confused, and he's this shepherd who decides, you know what? I'm just going to go travel the world, and sells all his sheep, barely has any money, gets into trouble, gets caught up with life, has to get another job as a clerk at a random shop in a different country, and he's just going through life trying to find this treasure because he heard about this gold somewhere. And he goes through this whole journey trying to find the alchemist, which rumors had it that the alchemist knew how to make anything into gold. So he was in search of this alchemist to find wealth and fortune, which is very relatable, right? Many of us want wealth. Many of us are in search of wealth. But something I emphasize in this show is that there's more to life than just wealth, right? There's relationships, there's health. If you don't have health, then you don't have the proper toolkit to enjoy your wealth. And if you don't have relationships, then you don't have the proper people to enjoy your wealth with. So wealth without the other two pillars still creates a crumbling infrastructure for you. So these foundational pillars are so important. And spoiler alert, this is exactly what, some essence of what the protagonist starts to understand. Another symbolism is the alchemist. And the alchemist is a character in the book, but he's also very symbolic and symbolizes wisdom, enlightenment, and is often this guiding force that pushes the protagonist towards his self-discovery and achieving his dreams. The desert is often discussed in the book, and they often discuss the desert as having a soul. The desert almost feels like a character in this book as well. And the desert basically represents the challenges and trials of life and the actual journey itself, right? So this is where the protagonist will look into the distance and confront his desires, confront his fears, confront his failures, and look at the desert and say, he'll look at the desert and look for signs of the universe. And that leads me to the next point, which is the omens that are often mentioned in this book. And omens were symbolic for this idea of messages from the universe. They symbolized that the world is trying to communicate with us. The omens in this book were two pebbles, a black and white pebble. One meant it's basically as if you were carrying a dice or something and you rolled it to figure out what your next move should be, right? So it was basically symbolic like that. And he had these omens that he believed were there to communicate with him, and the universe was trying to communicate with him. So this leads me to the second section, which is the philosophical depth of this book. And there's a few points that are really important here. One is understanding what the personal legend is, and in this book, it's a very core tenet of the book. And it basically talks about how everybody has a dream, everybody has a purpose, and everybody has a personal legend that they're meant to achieve in their lifetime. And recognizing and pursuing this dream is what creates a fulfilled life. I actually have a quote here that I took from the book that says, "When you really want something, it's because the desire originated in the soul of the universe. Is your mission on Earth," on page 21. And that is profound, because any inclination you have towards something, any desire or interest you have towards something, is because deep down it is obtainable within your realm of reality, right? If you can dream it, you can believe it, you can achieve it. In order to actually achieve something, you first need to dream of it and bring it into existence. So therefore, your ability to even dream of this idea means it's within your realm of possibility. And that should be very exciting for all of us, because that means the only thing that hinders us from that dream is ourself. And there's actually another quote on page 73. It says, "But this fear evaporates when we understand that our life stories in the history of the world were written by the same hand." The difference between somebody that actually succeeded and somebody that never tried was that person got over their fear and understood this quote exactly, that the history of the world and the story of our lives were written by the same hand, because they dared to dream. Going further, it says, "Everything under the sun has been written by one hand only. It is the hand that evokes love, the creation of a twin soul for every person in this world. Without such love, one's dream would have no meaning." Going back to what we were talking about, there's also this idea of the languages of the world, right? So this idea of a universal language and how the world's trying to speak to you. And I'll give you a small example in my own personal life about how I believe the world actually tries to communicate with you, right? In a way, in a symbolic way. For example, when I dropped the idea of going to medical school and becoming a doctor, which was a goal of mine my whole life, I couldn't quite put a definitive understanding to it. I just had an intuitive understanding to it. I had some intuition tell me, my gut feeling told me that I need to do something else. I have a bigger purpose here. It almost felt like the shepherd leaving his comfort zone of being a shepherd, right? He could just herd his sheep, make a good living, live his life, slowly invest some money, live his life, and then die. But he felt that he had some higher purpose calling him, so he sold his sheep. And that's exactly how I felt. And it was actually very frustrating at that time, because so many people would ask me, "Do you regret it? Why did you do it? Do you regret it? Do you regret it?" And I remember my only answer was, that is something I can only answer in hindsight in the future. I personally don't really know. And I think people kind of consider me a bum for saying that, because they're like, wow, this guy literally gave up a high-paying 6-figure job and high status, right, as a doctor with a white coat, and he doesn't even have a plan B. But the plan B was to follow my dreams, to follow my vision, to follow my life. And that road was not easy, and it's still not easy. It's gotten far more exciting. I'm starting to accept the outcome of flowing with the wind, you could say. But man, that was a tough time, because I didn't even think of a plan B. And as soon as I graduated from undergrad, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go full-fledged into this content stuff. But coming from immigrant Indian parents, they had zero tolerance for that. Going back to what I was saying, it was hard, but I felt this gut feeling. And I'm actually currently reading this Ayurveda book called Healing Your Gut, Mind, and Emotions. And there's this strong understanding that your gut, mind have a connection. And I actually read about this in anthropology too. There is this hypothesis called the gut-brain hypothesis, where there is a direct link between our gut and our brain, and our brains evolved as our guts got smaller over time, which helped us become what we call today Homo sapiens, the modern human, right? So there is a strong connection between our mind and our gut. Think about food comas. When you eat a ton of food, what happens to your brain? Are you super focused? Right? No, you're not. You're like, yeah, I think it's about time I take a nap, because the only thing you can think about is digesting this food. You're not, literally, you can barely think at all. You might just watch some TV and lay in bed. And I say this from personal experience. I mean, whenever I eat a ton of rice or something, ton of carb loading, Italian food for sure, when I eat this massive bowl of pasta, it's game over, right? So there is this connection between the mind and the gut, and intuition often comes from the gut, right? Because think about it. Think about the core of what I'm saying here. If there's a connection between your mind and your gut, wouldn't you say the gut, in a way, has its own mind? It's a little weird, a little abstract, but, if you keep an open mind here, it kind of starts to make sense. That's the colloquial term gut feeling comes from, right? And if you get into a little bit of spirituality, right, it might come from a higher purpose of understanding the things around you that are pushing you in a direction or not. But I believe in this, what this book talks about is the universe, the world, the language of the world trying to talk to you. And I think the more you follow your life purpose, the more you become in tuned with understanding that feeling, right? Because think about it. If you stay in a 9-to-5 job for 40 years, you've basically suppressed and pushed down that intuitive understanding of yourself to the point where you probably no longer understand or feel it or can even sense it anymore. And I think the more you follow in line with who you are and who you are meant to be, the better in tune you are with your body, your understanding, and your intuition. And I think that's another very strong point in this philosophical depth perception. Moving on to this last portion here, and spoiler alert, if you haven't read the book and you want to read it, this is a huge spoiler. It's the biggest spoiler. I'm talking about the ending of the book. But if you don't have plans to read it, or you don't really mind and you want to get the information that I'm about to share anyways, go ahead and stick around. Otherwise, go check out the book, go read it, or go get some summaries or something and come back to this episode where we left off. But anyways, in the conclusion of The Alchemist, Santiago reaches this pyramid in Egypt, and the location he had seen the location he saw was a reoccurring dream he had, and he believed this to be the place where he was going to find that hidden treasure. And he starts digging and digging, and then this group of men ambush him, and they eventually spare his life because they think he's just this delusional kid that's looking for treasure. But before they go, the man says, this one man, the leader I'm assuming, says he too once had a dream for treasure and a quest to find it. But then he just becomes cynical and says it was just merely but a dream in this ruined church of Spain. And that's when the protagonist had an aha moment, because that's where he came from. That was his starting point. So he travels all the way back home, and he, sure enough, finds the treasure just laying there, the gold, right? And I think one big point here is that this novel reinforces this idea of cyclical nature of life, and this journey of going from the starting location and going back to the starting location, which is basically saying that life is nothing but a journey, and you need to enjoy this process of journey and who you become for it, right? This is why I like to say life is like a dance, not a start to finish. And this is the way I rationalize things, is I think I'm more excited about the person I become from achieving the goal than the goal itself. Right? So if your goal is to become a millionaire, you should be more excited about the person you would become in order to become a millionaire than the actual $1 million themselves. Which is why I believe most people can't achieve their goals, because they have the wrong influencing factor of what they are driven by. It's often something I talked about in Atomic Habits is if you have this goal-oriented fixation, you're either not going to achieve the goal, or once you achieve the goal, you have no motivation or drive to do anything else because you weren't focused on the systems, you were focused on the goal. Journey being the same synonymous understanding of what we're talking about here, right? So another great point was the journey over the destination, which is basically what we've been talking about. That was point 2. And I really do believe that the protagonist, right, he grew spiritually, he grew wisdom, personal growth, perseverance, dedication, courage, right? There was many moments he almost died on this journey, and he grew so much from it. So when he found that wealth, he was ready because he had become the person in order to obtain that wealth. Think about the times when people win the lottery, right? Most lottery winners lose that money. Why? Because they didn't become the person in order to properly utilize that wealth. That's why they blew it. So if you really want to become somebody, whatever that identity that you're hoping for, one, you need to already believe that you can have it, because like we talked about at the beginning, if your mind has any inclination towards a desire, a true desire, then that means it was already in your realm of possibilities, and you need to go for it. But you need to understand that this comes from a personal journey, and you need to enjoy the journey, right? You need to enjoy the idea that you are going to become somebody, that this journey is the part that you are urging for, right? In essence, you might think millionaire is the thing that you're shooting for, but it's actually the 100 steps that it took you to get to that millionaire status, the change in habits, the change in mindset, the change of who you became in order to handle $1 million, or handle $1 million net worth, or $1 billion net worth, or whoever you want to become, or an Olympic athlete, right? I have a friend who was a former US Olympic athlete, and we talked about it, and his mindset, man, strong like Kobe. The reason Kobe's so attractive is because of his mindset. He was authentic, and he had a Mamba mentality, right? Job's not finished. He had this strong conviction that he had to do it, right? He followed his journey, and he became somebody from it. There's this one judge from Shark Tank, her name's Barbara something, and very smart woman, very successful woman, and many others have said this too, is if you become the best at something, money will naturally flow towards that direction. You shouldn't even have to make money as the goal. Of course, we have financial requirements and financial burdens, right? Paying rent, buying food, but once you've reached that level of, the lowest point of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is security. So once you have enough money for a car, a place to live / sleep, and food to eat to survive, you need to understand, what do I need to do to fulfill my soul and go on this journey? And it's not easy, I will say from personal experience. Like I said, when I dropped medicine, it was a very, very hard decision. I mean, I think I spent 6 months thinking about whether I should drop it, because it was a life-altering decision. And before that, it was the only decision I ever thought about in my life. I mean, it was almost certain. Anybody that knew me knew that that's what I wanted, and I had no alternative. Because something about me, my dad has said this before as well, is once I set my mind to something, I'm going to do it, because I have that level of conviction that I will do it. Job's not finished. And, this is a complete side tangent. It could be a complete another episode, actually, which I might do. This idea between quitting and letting go. Sorry, quitting and pivoting, I should say, right? Most people say, oh, you're a quitter, or like you never succeed in anything. But sometimes it's best to just pivot. Like, who am I fulfilling if I just stay on this and do this grind and get to medical school, get into my 30s, massive debt. Now I have a large mortgage payment, a ton of car payments, probably a wife, maybe even kids. And now I'm in later years of my life with a lot of financial issues, of payments that need to be made and I can't follow my personal journey. All to what? So nobody called me a quitter? Well, how about you take that same 10 years, like we talked about in another episode, 10 years are going to go by anyways. What if you took that same 10 years and did what you wanted? No one's going to call you a quitter then when you succeed, right? Right? Anyways, I went into a couple tangents, but this idea of following your journey is really important. And I understand how difficult it can be. I think a few episodes back, I wrote an episode about how success can be a lonely journey. And it's for reasons like this. It was actually, I had the Alchemist book in mind when I made that episode. And they both kind of are linked, I could say, right? Linked episodes. But in conclusion, guys, the importance of pursuing your own personal destiny, your own personal legend, or dreams is very important. And I can't stress this enough. You know, in life, we're often indoctrinated to this understanding that material treasures is what has value. And they're great and all. They give you a short-term dopamine hit, short-term satisfaction. But the true treasure lies in the wisdom and experience you gain in the pursuit of your dreams, right? You can go buy that luxury watch as a milestone statement piece, but personally for me, right, the idea behind having a luxury watch should be for a milestone statement piece, because I think at that point, the symbolism behind the watch is all those hours, days, years of blood, sweat, and tears that you put into getting to that moment. And it's a reminder every time you see it, right? Adding sentimental value to material items has a stronger value in your life than just buying the next watch and the next watch and the next watch, right? But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode on The Alchemist and you got a couple things out of it. Hopefully, please share this message. Will really help me. If you're wondering how you guys can help me grow this community, just word of mouth and sharing it and sharing this episode with somebody that you think would benefit from getting a short synopsis of this book and application of what they can do into their own lives would be great for not just them, but for me as well. But anyways, everybody, I really do appreciate your time and investing it here with me. And remember, you either learn from or you're learned from. Thanks.